right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, your newest IFBB Pro, and really impressive, really aesthetic IFBB Pro, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Siem Goosens, just won the William Bonac Classic this weekend to earn his pro card in bodybuilding. Now, we talked a couple weeks ago about a guy that turned pro by the name of Marcelo De Angelis, aka Horse MD, who also turned pro in bodybuilding, earning his IFBB Pro card to become a professional bodybuilder. But we talked about how aesthetic Horse MD was when he won his pro card, and even threw around expressions like maybe the most aesthetic IFBB Pro card holder in bodybuilding. And I think we have a similar situation here with Siem, because one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about him is A, because I find his physique so aesthetically pleasing, but B, because he was also a finalist in the Mr. Golden Era competition I ran on my channel a few years back. And I love to see some of these guys that you guys voted to be some of the most basically aesthetic guys on the internet doing really, really well in actual competition. I mean, we saw it with Wesley Vissers. He went on to have a extremely successful amateur career. Then he earned his IFBB Pro card and did everything that he did up until this point. And then you guys saw this past year's Classic Physique Olympia, Urs Kalsinski. He was also a Golden Era competitor, and he placed top 4 at the Olympia this year. But one of the things that I was impressed with, really impressed with actually, with Siem's package that he presented here at this NPC William Bonac Classic, was actually his vacuum pose. His posing in general was really good, but really tremendous control over the vacuum pose itself. Really, really accentuated, really flattening out his stomach to a really impressive degree. And just that really deep vacuum with the really flat abdominal wall, I think, is really how the vacuum pose was meant to be hit. And I just think he does a really good job of hitting that pose, and he really looks like he came straight out of the Golden Era, no pun intended. So I wanted to include that in this video as one of the first stories, because this is something that I love to see, because again, this was not a classic physique competition. He won the overall and won his pro card specifically in bodybuilding. Now, granted, once he gets to the IFBB, he kind of reserves the right to go. If he wants to go to 212, he can. If he wants to go to Classic, he can. If he wants to compete in Men's Open, he can. And it looks like he hasn't made that decision yet. But I do think it's a very important distinction to make note of the fact that he earned his pro card not in Classic, but bodybuilding. And looking at his physique, you would think it was Classic. But again, just wanted to congratulate him and start out the video with that really positive story. Now, next up in the news, in a recent episode of the Cutler Cast with Jay Cutler and my friend manager Matt, they interviewed Dan Solomon, who is like the chief operating officer, I guess would be the title, of the Olympia. So he's like one of the top brass over at the Olympia. And one of the first topics they discussed in this interview was the topic that a lot of the industry was talking about earlier this year after Shawn Rhoden passed, the Shawn Ray controversy, the interview that Shawn Ray did with Dave Palumbo, and some of the backlash that Shawn Ray got in regard to some of his comments about Rhoden that people perceived as, and were, disrespectful and inaccurate. So it was cool. It was interesting to see Dan's perspective, because Dan basically represents the Olympia, and Shawn Ray obviously has been employed by the Olympia for a while. He does work for them. He does commentary for them. He does interviews for them. And in that way, Shawn Ray is kind of an extension of the Olympia. So for someone at the top like Dan to be reacting to Shawn's comments, I think is kind of an important statement on what was said. So he says that he doesn't agree with a lot of what Shawn Ray said, and he thinks that a lot of what Shawn said, it was distasteful, it was the wrong time, it was insensitive, and again, some of it was flat out wrong. But one thing that I liked that Dan was saying, was he doesn't really believe in cancel culture. He believes that people in the industry should have the right to voice their opinions on things, whether they're right or wrong, whether he agrees or disagrees. This whole discourse and discussion, he doesn't want the Olympia to ever be an organization that stifles that or steps on that or suppresses that. He wants people to be able to talk about the Olympia and its athletes as much as they want and have free expression to do so. So he kind of said, there's not really going to be a canceling or firing of Shawn Ray, at least on behalf of the Olympia, from the Olympia's point of view, which I've got to say, I think is a good perspective to have on this. While I didn't agree with a lot of what Shawn said, and I thought a lot of it was disrespectful, and, the part about the drugs was completely inaccurate, I honestly don't want to see anybody get canceled or fired for things that they've said in the past. Maybe disciplined, maybe to some extent discipline in this case, would be warranted. But, firing and canceling, I don't necessarily believe in. Like I said, I'm not defending Shawn Ray. I don't agree with what he said, but I do think it was refreshing to hear kind of a spokesperson for the Olympia have this standpoint, on everybody that gives commentary in the industry. Because that would include me. It would include other channels like RX Muscle, like Muscular Development, like Generation Iron, whatever you could think of. I like the idea that they kind of have that open-minded approach to the media, or at least they outwardly facing, they say they do. But I kind of wanted to include this in the video because I want to get your guys' perspective on it. What do you guys think about the Shawn Ray situation? Do you think there should be some kind of discipline taken against Shawn? Do you think he should be fired? Do you think he should be canceled? Do you think he should keep his job, whatever capacity they're going to have him at the Olympia? I don't know. To be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure what all Shawn's responsibilities are for the Olympia, if it's just doing the commentary, the voiceover stuff, or what. I don't really know what his actual position is there. So as far as him getting hired or fired, I don't really know what that would even include. But Dan had a good point. He was talking about when he used to do interviews on behalf of the Olympia. So this was before he was in charge at the Olympia. He was saying one of the biggest criticisms that he would get and that Bob Ciccarello would get is that that fans would perceive them as like an instrument of the organization. And fans would think and criticize them and say, you're not asking the hard questions, or you're not talking about this or that because you're being censored by the organization. You don't want to piss off the Olympia. You don't want to piss off the IFBB. So you're holding back on what you can and can't say. And Dan had a good point in saying that now that he's in charge at the Olympia, he doesn't want that to be the perception. He doesn't want that to be how people feel about people like Shawn Ray or anyone else associated with the Olympia. He doesn't want people to feel like the organization is trying to censor the conversation. So his point is really, if they fired Shawn because of something he said that really, was outside of the Olympia. He wasn't acting on behalf of the Olympia when he did that interview with Dave Palumbo. It was really just kind of a random internet interview. If they fired Shawn for doing something like that, that would kind of be an example of the organization censoring a commentator, a media guy. But anyway, like I said, I'm curious to get your guys' perspective on it because it does kind of bring up the issue of, if Shawn is punished or fired or whatever, it does bring up the issue of censorship by the organization, because it would be by the organization that Shawn is getting punished or fired or whatever, and to what extent, has Shawn already been punished in the court of public opinion? I mean, I think there's something to be said for having, basically right now the entire industry seems to not like Shawn Ray, as I'm sure you guys are going to see in the comment section of this video, and maybe that is punishment enough. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Now, next up in the news, let's talk about James Hollingshead and his 2022 Arnold Classic predictions. The Arnold Classic is just right around the corner. So first, let me roll you guys James's predictions, and I'll give you guys my thoughts and a little bit of insight on some of the guys that I know may or may not be competing.
Guys, I've got to make a prediction here, yeah? And this is controversial. Let me know what you think on this, yeah? So, I've got friends in the Arnold, and my number one pick right now is Brett. There's one dark horse, and he's not actually professional yet, but he is doing the amateur, and it's my man Andrew Jack. If Andrew wins the amateur and goes into the Open Pro, it's not impossible that he could not win the whole thing. So Brett, keep an eye on Andrew, keep working like a fucking beast. Andrew, keep an eye on Brett, keep working like a fucking beast, because it's going to be one hell of a show. And I'm not discounting anyone else, I'm just saying that's two people that I know personally, and I think of great people and have amazing, amazing bodies. It's going to be a freak show. So, oh shit.
So, Brett Wilkin, who is in the Arnold Classic, and Andrew Jack are two of his kind of wild cards to win the show. So, Andrew Jack is doing the amateur show, the Arnold Amateur, right before the Arnold Pro. And if he's able to win that, he can compete in the Arnold Pro, which is invitation only, but generally they invite the winner of the amateur competition to go ahead and compete in the pro one. So Cedric is in. As far as I know, Justin Rodriguez has said he's in. Brandon Curry is a maybe. Steve Kuklo, I believe, is in. In Classic Physique, you're going to have the top four, except for Chris Bumstead. Breon, Terrence, and Urs are all in, and Logan Franklin is out. We know that Nick Walker, who would be the defending champion for the Arnold Classic this year, is not defending the title this year, so that's at least one guy out. I think Regan is a maybe right now. Bonac is a maybe right now for the Arnold. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys think about James's predictions here. Brett Wilkin obviously had a tremendous season, a rookie season in 2021. And yeah, Andrew Jacked is still an amateur competitor, but let's go over to a somewhat recent physique update from him from like mid-November, where he gives his height and weight: 6'2", 133.6 kgs, which is roughly 294.5 pounds. The guy is obviously a freak of nature. The guy's huge. We've seen him compete a couple times as an amateur, and he looks really impressive. He's a guy that I really think could go a long way as a pro. A show like the Arnold Amateur would be a really good show for him to make a statement, and if he were to win that show and then do the Arnold Pro, I think he does stand a chance in men's open bodybuilding of being a very successful pro. My only criticism of Andrew pretty much has always been just the legs, both the size and separation. Just a little bit more separation, a little bit more size in the legs to match how freaky his upper body is. Specifically in the quads, I think, is where he would want to work on the separation, but the guy's a beast. There's no question about that. And if he were able to do that, I think that would be impressive. And the last guy that I can think of that did that was, I think Morgan Asti was the last big name that I think won the Arnold Amateur and then went on to compete in the Arnold Pro. Now, granted, he didn't play super well in the Pro Arnold, but he did make a statement. He had really good conditioning when he did that. So it'll be interesting to watch. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video there. I was actually just talking to my guy at the Arnold, and he was telling me that the official competitor list will be coming out on Friday. So stay tuned for that. And that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, sorry I haven't been posting as frequently. I told you guys a couple days ago, I've been having these chest pains. I've been in and out of the ER and stuff. So I'm just taking it a little bit easy, and really, there's a good time to take a break because there's not a whole lot going on in the bodybuilding world right now. Not a whole lot of competitions. Not a whole lot of news, so we'll probably post a video like every other day or every 2 days for the rest of December, and then we'll get back into the swing of things more so in January when things kick back up for the Arnold Classic. But I appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the kind words and messages I've gotten over the past few days. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you thumbs up the video. As always, I got to remind you guys. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out.